The cardboard box felt lighter than it should have. 6 years of my life reduced to a coffee-stained mug, a wilted succulent, and a framed photo of my daughter's first day of kindergarten. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me. Maybe I was too numb for my body to catch up with what had just happened. "Security will escort you out, Miss Chen." Dr. Patricia Holloway's voice still echoed in my skull, cold and clinical, like she was delivering a terminal diagnosis to someone she'd never met. Not to Sarah Chen, the senior ICU nurse who'd pulled 14-hour shifts during the pandemic. Not to the woman who'd trained half the staff currently working on the 4th floor. Just Ms. Chen, a liability to be removed. The September sun hit my face as the glass doors of Metropolitan General Hospital whispered shut behind me. 4:15 in the afternoon. Rush hour was just beginning, and I lived 7 miles away. My car had died 3 weeks ago. Transmission failure I couldn't afford to fix on a nurse's salary. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the last 6 years keeping people alive, and I couldn't even keep a 15-year-old Honda running. I started walking. The cardboard dug into my ribs. My sensible nursing shoes, so comfortable during 12-hour shifts, suddenly felt like concrete blocks. But I kept moving, one foot in front of the other, because that's what you do when your entire world has just collapsed and you have a 9-year-old daughter waiting at after-school care. I'd figure out how to tell Emma later. How do you explain to a 4th grader that mommy lost her job for saving someone's life? 6 years earlier, I'd walked through those same hospital doors as a newly hired ICU nurse, full of purpose and hope. My husband, James, had just died. Pancreatic cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to funeral, and I needed something to fight for. Emma was 3 years old, asking why Daddy wasn't coming home, and I had no answers except to throw myself into the one thing that made sense, helping people survive what James couldn't. Metropolitan General became my second home. I learned every physician's quirk, every piece of equipment's temperament, every shortcut that could save precious seconds. I became the nurse doctors requested by name, the one who could spot sepsis developing before the lab work came back, who could talk down a patient spiraling into panic, who stayed late without complaint because someone's grandmother needed an extra hand to hold. Dr. Richard Morrison, the chief of surgery, once told me I had instincts you can't teach. I'd helped him save a 17-year-old car accident victim by recognizing the subtle signs of a missed internal bleed. The head of cardiology wrote me a commendation after I caught a medication error that would have killed a transplant patient. But hospitals aren't run by doctors anymore. They're run by administrators, by people like Dr. Patricia Holloway, our new Chief Operating Officer, who arrived 8 months ago with an MBA from Stanford and a mandate to optimize operational efficiency. She'd never worked a single shift as a nurse or physician, never held a patient's hand while they took their last breath, never had to tell a family that despite everything, it wasn't enough. But she had spreadsheets and quarterly projections and a board of directors who cared more about profit margins than patient outcomes. I should have seen the signs. The new protocol compliance meetings, the memo about unauthorized overtime, the directive that nurses needed explicit physician authorization before administering any treatment outside standard orders, even in emergencies. We all joked about it in the break room, rolling our eyes at the bureaucracy, but I didn't laugh. I'd seen what happened when nurses couldn't trust their own judgment, when red tape tangled around someone's last minutes on Earth. 2 weeks ago, everything changed. It was a Tuesday night, 11:47 p.m. I was 3 hours into a double shift, covering for a colleague whose father had suffered a stroke. The ICU was unusually quiet. Just 4 patients, all stable. I was catching up on charting when the ER called. Incoming trauma, ETA 4 minutes, 22-year-old male, motorcycle versus truck, GCS 7, significant blood loss. They're bringing him straight to ICU 3. I prepped the bay, running through the mental checklist I'd performed hundreds of times. IV access, blood products, intubation equipment, crash cart. The familiar rhythm of preparations settled my nerves. The patient, Marcus Williams, according to the paramedics' report, arrived in critical condition. Massive internal bleeding, possible brain injury, BP dropping fast. The trauma surgeon on call was stuck in another emergency surgery. The ER physician gave rapid-fire orders and disappeared back to the controlled chaos downstairs. And Marcus started to crash. His blood pressure plummeted. The monitor's alarm screamed. I grabbed the ultrasound probe, a skill I'd learned in an advanced trauma nursing course I'd paid for myself, and scanned his abdomen. There, a massive hematoma, growing by the second, internal bleeding that would kill him in minutes if we didn't act. The protocol was clear. Wait for the surgeon. Get authorization. Don't deviate from standard orders. But Marcus didn't have minutes. He had seconds. I'd seen this exact scenario before, watched a patient die while we waited for a surgeon stuck in traffic. I knew what needed to be done. A temporizing procedure, not surgery, but an intervention to slow the bleeding until the surgeon could arrive. Something I was trained to do, something that fell in the gray zone between nursing and emergency medicine. I made the choice. I performed the procedure. Marcus stabilized. The trauma surgeon arrived 12 minutes later, rushed Marcus to the OR, and saved his life. When he came out of surgery, he found me and shook my hand. "That kid would be dead if you'd waited for me," he said. "You made the right call." I thought that was the end of it. The next morning, I found a memo in my employee mailbox, a mandatory meeting with Dr. Holloway and the hospital's risk management attorney. That's when the knot formed in my stomach. That's when I started to understand that saving Marcus Williams might have cost me everything. The meeting was 2 days later, in a conference room with no windows and fluorescent lights that turned everyone's skin the color of spoiled milk. Dr. Holloway sat across from me, flanked by the attorney, a thin man in an expensive suit who looked like he'd never experienced a moment of uncertainty in his life, and Janet Reeves, the ICU nursing director who'd hired me 6 years ago and who now wouldn't meet my eyes. "Miss Chen," Holloway began, her voice perfectly modulated, "we need to discuss the incident involving patient Marcus Williams on the night of September 3rd. "The patient I saved?" I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. "The patient you treated outside your scope of practice, without physician authorization, in direct violation of hospital protocol." The attorney slid a document across the table, an incident report filed by someone I'd never heard of, detailing my unauthorized medical procedure and the hospital's significant liability exposure. "Marcus Williams is alive because of what I did," I said, keeping my voice steady. "The trauma surgeon's opinion is noted," the attorney interrupted. However, the hospital cannot condone nurses performing procedures outside their licensed scope, regardless of outcome. The liability implications are severe. Janet finally spoke, her voice quiet. "Sarah, you know the protocols exist for a reason." "The protocols exist to protect the hospital, not the patients," I shot back. "If I'd followed protocol, Marcus would be in the morgue." Holloway's expression didn't change. "We're placing you on immediate administrative leave while we conduct a full investigation. 2 weeks, paid. During this time, you are not to contact any hospital staff or discuss this incident with anyone outside the official investigation." I stared at her, understanding crystallizing like ice in my veins. This wasn't about patient safety or medical ethics. It was about containing a perceived threat to the hospital's bottom line. I'd saved a life, and they were going to punish me for it. But I nodded and took my leave papers and walked out of that conference room still believing that truth and justice would prevail, that someone would recognize I'd done the right thing. I was wrong. The 2 weeks of administrative leave stretched like a prison sentence. I wasn't allowed to work, but I also wasn't allowed to know what the investigation had found. Emma asked why I was home so much. I told her I was on vacation. The lie tasted like copper in my mouth. On day 13, I got the call. Return to the hospital for a final meeting at 3 p.m. I dressed carefully that morning, my best professional outfit, minimal makeup, hair pulled back. I prepared what I'd say, how I'd defend my actions. I even brought letters of support from colleagues, though I'd technically violated the order not to discuss the case by asking for them. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. Dr. Holloway was there, along with the attorney and a representative from HR I'd never met. Janet wasn't there. Later, I'd learned she'd resigned in protest 2 days earlier, and the hospital had kept it quiet. "Ms. Chen, the investigation has concluded," Holloway said, her hands folded on the table like she was praying. "The findings indicate gross negligence, willful violation of hospital protocol, and conduct that places Metropolitan General Hospital at significant legal and financial risk." I saved a patient. You performed a medical procedure outside your scope of practice without authorization, in direct violation of hospital protocol. The attorney slid a document across the table. Another incident report, this one detailing the unauthorized procedure and the hospital's exposed liability. "Mr. Williams' family has been made aware of the circumstances and has expressed concern about the unauthorized nature of your intervention." My blood went cold. "His family? You told his family What did you tell them?" "We informed them of the facts, that your son received treatment from an individual not authorized to provide such treatment. They're considering legal action against the hospital." It hit me like a physical blow. They'd turned Marcus's family against me. They'd reframed my life-saving intervention as reckless endangerment. They'd weaponized the people I'd helped to justify what came next. "Effective immediately, your employment at Metropolitan General Hospital is terminated. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. You have 15 minutes. "You're firing me for saving someone's life." "We're terminating your employment for gross negligence and violation of hospital policy," the attorney corrected. "Should you choose to contest this decision or speak publicly about this matter, please be aware that we will vigorously defend the hospital's interests and reputation." It was a threat, a clear, unmistakable threat. I looked at Holloway, really looked at her, and saw nothing behind her eyes. No conflict, no doubt, no humanity, just calculation. She'd sacrificed me to protect the hospital from a lawsuit that might never materialize, to send a message to every other nurse who might think their judgment mattered more than protocol. The security guard, Tony, who I'd shared coffee with 100 times, couldn't look at me as he walked me to my locker. I packed my belongings in silence, my hands steady, even as my world shattered. And that's how I ended up on the sidewalk at 4:15 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, carrying a cardboard box and walking home because I couldn't afford to fix my car on a nurse's salary I no longer had. The first mile, I was numb, just putting one foot in front of the other, the box growing heavier with each step, the afternoon sun beating down on my shoulders. The second mile, the anger came. Not the hot, explosive kind, the cold, methodical kind that settles in your bones and calculates. They'd taken everything: my career, my purpose, my ability to provide for my daughter. 6 years of dedication, of sacrifice, of nights away from Emma to help strangers in their darkest moments. All of it erased because I'd refused to let a young man die. The third mile, I started to cry. Not sobbing, I didn't have the energy for that. Just silent tears tracking down my cheeks while I walked, because what else could I do? Emma's after-school care cost $600 a month. Our rent was $1,800. I had maybe $3,000 in savings. James's life insurance had run out years ago, consumed by medical bills and the costs of keeping us afloat. How was I going to tell my daughter that everything was falling apart? My phone buzzed. A text from Emma's teacher. "Emma's not feeling well, headache and upset stomach. Can you pick her up early?" I looked at the time, 4:47 p.m. I was still 4 miles from the school, on foot, carrying a box of my destroyed career. I texted back, "On my way, 30 minutes." I started walking faster, my professional shoes raising blisters I couldn't feel yet. The box's edges dug into my ribs, sweat soaked through my blouse, but I moved faster because my daughter needed me, and that was the one thing that couldn't break, the one thing I couldn't fail at. The fourth mile, I thought about Marcus Williams, 22 years old, probably somebody's son, maybe somebody's brother. He'd get to grow old now, to fall in love, to make mistakes and learn from them, to live, because I'd refused to let protocol kill him. Was I supposed to regret that? Was I supposed to wish I'd followed the rules and let him die? I couldn't. Even now, even walking home unemployed and terrified, I couldn't regret it. The fifth mile, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but habit made me click accept. "Is this Sarah Chen?" A woman's voice, professional but warm. "Yes?" "Miss Chen, my name is Dr. Amanda Reeves. I'm the medical director at Northside Community Hospital. I heard about what happened at Metropolitan General." My heart sank. Word had already spread. My career was over before I could even process what losing it meant. "I also heard what you did for Marcus Williams. I heard you saved his life when protocol said to wait. I heard you trusted your training and your instincts over bureaucracy." I stopped walking there, on the sidewalk, breathing hard. "Yes. We have an opening in our ICU. It's a smaller hospital, fewer resources than Metropolitan, but we value nurses who think for themselves, who put patients first. The pay is comparable, the benefits are good, and we don't fire people for being excellent at their jobs. Would you be interested in an interview?" I stood there, the box in my arms, tears drying on my cheeks, and felt something crack open in my chest. Not hope, not yet, but possibility. "Yes," I managed. "Yes, I would." Wonderful. How's tomorrow at 10 a.m.? We made the arrangements. She hung up. I stood there for another moment, letting the weight of the last hour settle into something I could carry. Then I kept walking because Emma was waiting, and she needed to know that even when the world kicks you down, you get back up. I was 2 blocks from the school, walking past the old industrial park, when I heard them. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere, a deep, rhythmic thumping that vibrated in my chest. I looked up and saw them, 2 helicopters, descending fast, kicking up dust and debris from the abandoned lot next to the road. I stopped, confused, shielding my eyes from the swirling dirt. The helicopters touched down maybe 50 yards away, and before the rotors had even stopped spinning, people were jumping out. Paramedics, state police, someone in an expensive suit I didn't recognize. They were running toward me. "Are you Sarah Chen?" the suited man shouted over the dying rotor wash. "The nurse?" Yes? My arms tightened around the box reflexively. Oh, thank God. He was breathing hard, his face flushed. "I'm Robert Williams, Marcus Williams' father." The world tilted sideways. "We've been trying to reach you for an hour. The hospital wouldn't give us your contact information, privacy regulations. And then when we finally got through to them, they said you'd been let go, and we thought—" He stopped, took a breath. "There's been an accident, a major bridge collapse on Highway 74, multiple casualties. The nearest trauma center is overwhelmed. They're setting up a field hospital, but they need experienced ICU nurses. And my son told me you were the only one who could have saved him that night. He told me what you did." I stared at him. "The hospital told you They said your family was considering legal action against me." Robert Williams' expression darkened. "They what? That's a lie. We tried to send you a thank you gift, flowers, a card. They told us hospital policy didn't allow it. When Marcus tried to visit you last week to thank you in person, security turned him away. We had no idea you'd been fired until an hour ago when we finally spoke to another nurse there, a Janet Reeves." Janet. She'd broken her silence after all. "Miss Chen," the state police officer said, stepping forward, "we're invoking the Emergency Medical Services Act. The governor has declared a state of emergency. We're authorized to deputize qualified medical personnel to assist in disaster response. We need you." Behind them, I could see more figures emerging from the helicopters, medical equipment being unloaded, supplies being organized with military precision. "My daughter," I said. "I need to pick up my daughter from school." "Already handled," Robert Williams said. "If you agree to help, we have a car waiting to bring her to a safe location with professional childcare. She'll be looked after until you're done. And Miss Chen," he met my eyes, "I own Williams Medical Supply, the largest distributor of medical equipment in the state. After what you did for my son, after what I've learned about how that hospital treated you, I want to make this right." The suited man gestured toward the helicopters. "The disaster site is 16 minutes away by air. We have casualties with severe trauma, internal bleeding, exactly the kind of situations where your skills are critical. Will you help?" I looked down at the cardboard box in my arms, my coffee-stained mug, my wilted succulent, the remnants of a career they'd tried to destroy. Then I set the box down on the sidewalk, right there in the dirt and the dust. "Tell me what you need." The next 6 hours were a blur of blood and adrenaline and the kind of focused intensity that makes time disappear. The field hospital was chaos controlled by competence. Doctors and nurses from a dozen different facilities, working together with borrowed equipment and improvised solutions because people were dying and protocol was a luxury no one could afford. I worked 3 patients simultaneously, triaging by instinct, performing exactly the kind of interventions that had gotten me fired, temporizing procedures to stabilize trauma victims until they could be airlifted to proper surgical facilities, teaching less experienced nurses the techniques I'd learned over 6 years of ICU work, making split-second decisions that would determine whether someone's mother, someone's son, someone's best friend got to go home. And every single time I trusted my judgment. Every single time I did what was right instead of what was safe. Around midnight, Robert Williams found me in the makeshift triage area. I was covered in blood and dirt, running on coffee and pure stubbornness. Miss Chen, you should know, we've been documenting everything, every patient you've treated, every intervention, every outcome. The governor wants to personally commend you tomorrow. The media is already calling you a hero. I was too tired to process what that meant. The patients? 14 critical saves that wouldn't have survived transport to a hospital. Your work here is extraordinary. It's just nursing, I said. It's what we're supposed to do. He smiled, but there was something calculating in his expression. Metropolitan General is going to have a very difficult time explaining why they fired you for the exact same skills that saved 14 lives tonight, especially when it hits the news. And there it was. Not revenge I'd planned, but revenge the universe had handed me on a silver platter. The media doesn't need to know about my employment situation, I said carefully. Oh, I think they do. Robert Williams pulled out his phone, showed me a draft press release. My PR team prepared this. It details how you saved my son's life, how the hospital fired you for it, and how you were walking home, literally walking because you couldn't afford to fix your car on a nurse's salary, when you stopped to help at this disaster site. It's a hell of a story, Ms. Chen, and it's all true. I read the press release. It was devastating, factual, documented, impossible to refute. It would destroy Holloway's reputation and raise serious questions about Metropolitan General's priorities and practices. There's more, he said. I've already spoken to the State Nursing Board and the Medical Ethics Committee. They want to review your case. And I've made some calls to friends at other hospitals. You're going to have job offers, plural, by the end of the week, better positions than you had before, with administrations that actually value clinical judgment. I looked at him, this wealthy man whose son I saved, and understood what he was offering. Total vindication, public humiliation for the people who'd wronged me, a reversal of fortune so complete it would feel like divine intervention. Why? I asked. Why go to all this trouble? His expression softened. Because 3 weeks ago, my son was dying on a table, and you refused to let protocol kill him. You risked everything to save a stranger, and then they punished you for it. He paused. I have resources, Ms. Chen. I have influence, and I believe in using both to make sure people like you don't get crushed by bureaucrats more concerned with liability than lives. I thought about Holloway's cold eyes, the attorney's threats, the way they'd turned Marcus's family against me, or tried to, the calculated cruelty of destroying someone's career to protect a quarterly report. Do it, I said. Release everything. The story broke at 6 a.m. the next morning, across every major news outlet in the state. By 9 a.m., it was national news. By noon, the hashtag #ProtocolKills was trending on social media, with thousands of healthcare workers sharing their own stories of bureaucracy overruling medical judgment. Metropolitan General's phones were ringing off the hook. The board of directors called an emergency meeting. Dr. Patricia Holloway issued a statement defending her decision, which only made things worse when journalists started digging into her background and discovered a pattern of similar incidents at her previous hospitals. I slept through most of it, crashed at a hotel Robert Williams had insisted on paying for, with Emma safe beside me. When I finally woke up at 2 p.m., I had 247 missed calls and a phone that had basically melted from the volume of messages. 3 different hospitals had offered me positions. 2 were ICU director roles. 1 was a position developing emergency response protocols for trauma situations, exactly the kind of work I'd gotten fired for doing. The governor's office had scheduled a commendation ceremony. The State Nursing Association wanted to feature me in their next conference. Medical schools were reaching out about guest lectures on critical care decision-making. And Metropolitan General Hospital had issued a statement requesting a meeting to discuss potential reinstatement. I deleted that message without reading the full text. At 4 p.m., I met with the media outside the hotel, a decision I'd made carefully because I wanted my voice heard, not filtered through press releases. Emma was with Robert Williams's wife, playing with their grandchildren, blissfully unaware that her mother had become a minor celebrity. The reporters shouted questions. I waited for silence, then spoke. "I'm not a hero," I said. "I'm a nurse who did her job. The real question isn't why I saved Marcus Williams' life. The question is why a hospital thought that was a fireable offense. The question is how many other healthcare workers are being punished for putting patients first. The question is whether we've built a medical system more concerned with protecting institutions than protecting people." Someone asked if I wanted my job back. "No," I said firmly. "I want better than that. I want to work in a place that values clinical judgment, that trusts experienced nurses to make difficult decisions in critical moments, that understands healthcare isn't a spreadsheet, it's human lives hanging in the balance." Another reporter, "What do you say to Dr. Holloway and the administrators who fired you?" I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I hope they look at the 14 people who are alive today because I was allowed to use my training and my judgment, and I hope they ask themselves whether their protocols would have saved those lives. I hope they realize that good healthcare requires more than compliance. It requires courage." The questions continued, but I'd said what I needed to say. I thanked them and went back inside, where Emma was waiting with 1,000 questions of her own and a drawing she'd made of Mommy the Hero Nurse that I would frame and keep forever. 3 weeks later, I started my new position as Director of Emergency and Critical Care Services at Northside Community Hospital. The pay was 30% higher than my old salary. The administration actively encouraged nurses to exercise clinical judgment. My first project was developing new protocols that balanced institutional safety with patient care, protocols that trusted the people actually doing the work. Janet Reeves joined me 2 months later as my assistant director. Together, we built something better than what we'd lost. Marcus Williams visited on my first day, walking on his own 2 legs, his family beside him. He thanked me again, though I told him thanks weren't necessary. His father donated a full wing of new ICU equipment to the hospital in my honor. I tried to refuse, but he insisted. "You gave me my son back," he said. "This is the least I can do." As for Metropolitan General Hospital, Dr. Holloway resigned under pressure 3 months after the story broke. The hospital faced multiple investigations into their treatment protocols and their pattern of punishing healthcare workers for exercising medical judgment. Several policy changes were implemented. 3 board members were replaced. I'd like to say it fixed everything, that the system suddenly prioritized patients over profit, but that would be a lie. Hospitals are still run by administrators more concerned with liability than lives. Nurses still face impossible choices between protocol and patient welfare. But sometimes, when the story is loud enough, when the consequences are public enough, institutions are forced to change. Not because they want to, but because the cost of staying the same becomes too high. I still think about that Tuesday afternoon sometimes, walking home with a cardboard box, my career in ruins, thinking my life was over. I think about how close I came to giving up, to believing they'd won. And then I think about the sound of helicopter rotors, about 14 people who lived because I was there, about Emma's drawing of Mommy the Hero Nurse hanging in my office. Revenge, I learned, isn't always about making someone suffer. Sometimes it's about proving them wrong. Sometimes it's about building something better from the ruins they left behind. Sometimes it's about showing the world that the thing they tried to destroy was worth saving all along. 6 months after I was fired, I walked past Metropolitan General Hospital on my way to a conference. The building looked the same glass doors, same polished facade. But I was different. I was better, stronger, more certain of my purpose than ever before. I didn't stop walking. I had patients who needed me, a daughter who was proud of me, and a career that finally matched my values. That's the best revenge of all, living well, doing good, and proving that their worst couldn't break your best.